Today, I'm Nina Schoch. I'm the Executive Director for the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation, and I'm here today to talk to you about some of the work we're doing, some of the studies and education programs we're doing with Adirondack loons. So we are dedicated to promoting and inspiring passion for the conservation of common loons, and we do that through our scientific research and our educational programming in the Adirondack Park. We evolved from some research that was done back in 1998 to 2000 by a group called Biodiversity Research Institute, and they formed a cooperative loon program from 2000 to about 2007 with the Wildlife Conservation Society, New York State DEC, the Wild Center in Tupper Lake, and the Audubon Society. And since then, we evolved into our own nonprofit in 2017. We're studying loons for a variety of reasons. First off, they're high on the aquatic food web. They eat fish that eat other fish, that eat invertebrates and so on down the food web, and toxins that accumulate to high levels in aquatic habitats can accumulate to very high levels in loons. And they're extremely territorial during the breeding season. They will defend their nests and chicks from other loons. And they do, here's an example of a bird doing what's called a penguin dance. And this bird is very upset and guarding its chicks from other loons and boats. They will do this if they're very concerned about something being too close to their chicks or their nests. So if you see this, this is an indication that you're too close and you should move away. It's not a courtship ritual at all, it's a bird that's upset. And these birds also live 20 to 30 years. So all these characteristics make them a great environmental indicator of what's going on in the aquatic habitats, in the lakes and ponds in the Adirondacks where they breed. In New York, there are species of special concern, not endangered, not threatened, but New York State DEC does want to know how the population is doing. Another reason to study them is because people really like loons. They're a symbol of wild, remote places, and they, so it's a great resource and great environmental educational tool to talk to people about conservation issues affecting the lakes and ponds in the Adirondacks and elsewhere. Oops. There are actually 5 species of loons. In the Adirondacks, we have the common loon here that breeds, and they are here from late April through November. Occasionally, we also get the red-throated loon migrating through, and then in the winter, and very rarely a yellow-billed loon has been seen here. There's also the Pacific loon, which occurs on the west coast of North America, and the Arctic loon, which occurs very far west and in Eastern Europe. And all these species, their breeding range is in the northern hemisphere, northern hemisphere, and in North America, the wintering range is down along the coast, the east coast and then the west coast. They are uniquely specialized for living in water. Everything about them is designed to decrease resistance. Their bodies are very streamlined, their bones are dense and heavy, unlike other birds, and their legs are actually flattened sideways, so they can cut through the water like a knife, and the bodies go down to their knees, and then they can open their legs like a frog. They're turned kind of sideways, and they push this way through the water. And their feet, an adult male loon's foot is almost as big as my hand, and they can really get a lot of propulsion. I'll play that video again so you can see that. Maybe. There we go. So as he dives, look at where his feet are positioned. They're pretty far back, and they are turned sideways, so he's getting power from his feet. As you can imagine, this makes it really hard for them to walk on land. They have several different colorations. When they first hatch, they're a little tiny black downy puffball. And then by 2 weeks old or so, they've turned into this brown down stage. And they keep that for another month or so. And by 8 weeks, 9 weeks, they're getting the feathers in, the juvenile feather plumage, and then the down is sticking out. So they look pretty goofy at that point. At 9 weeks or so, they have this beautiful scaly gray plumage, and they keep that until they're 2 or 3 years old. And then in the summer, when they become an adult, they turn black and white. In the winter, the adults actually look a lot like the juvenile. And in all four plumages, they're dark above and light below, and this is great camouflage. A predator from above is going to see dark against dark water, and a predator from below is going to see light against light sky. They have several different vocalizations. Most people associate the loon with the wail. And this is a long-distance communication call between adults. I usually hear it when there's two adults that are swimming and they go down under and one comes up and doesn't know where the other is and dives and wails to find the missing bird. Another time I hear it is when a bird's flying over and one on the water will wail to let them know that territory is taken. Another call that people are familiar with is the tremolo. And this is actually an agitation distress call. That's what this bird is doing with the little chick. That photographer's a little too close for its comfort. And so if you're hearing tremolo, something is wrong. They're either upset with another loon or an eagle's flying over or a boat's too close for their comfort. Now males, they'll give a yodel. And that's what this bird is doing. And this is a very agitated alarm distress call. When they are yodeling, that means something is really bothering them. I usually see it when there's an eagle flying over or two males are fighting, or sometimes when an airplane flies over, a bird will yodel because they think it's a big eagle. I also see it when a boat, again, gets too close to the chick. So if you're hearing yodels, look around, make sure it's not you in the boat, and you might see an eagle flying over, or you might see two loons fighting or something like that. Now, the call most people don't associate with loons is the hoot. If you're hearing hoots, that means all is well, and they are just talking to each other. You aren't disturbing them at all. I usually hear hoots when adults are feeding chicks and the chicks are begging. They do this screechy, whiny stag, especially as they get older. They'll slam the parent around the neck and the bill, and they will tell the parent to go down and get some food. And then the parent goes down and comes up and does a hoot, and the chick is begging, and the parent goes, hoot, hoot, and then the chick comes over and gets the fish. So there's a lot of different factors that affect loons and their habitat. And we study quite a few of these in the Adirondack Park. There's a common thread between all of them, and that is humans. Even wildlife predators, where there's more humans, there's more garbage, like people are camping or something, and more opportunistic predators, things like raccoons and gulls and ravens and even bears. So if we're able to decrease our impact on the environment, we'll help loons and other wildlife too. Oops. Sorry. So in 1998, Biodiversity Research Institute came to New York and captured some loons to learn more about how mercury was affecting the population here. And mercury is an airborne pollutant that's the primary source worldwide was through coal-fired power plants. And in the United States, the emissions were blown from west to east across North America, and the Midwest coal-fired power plants were a huge source of mercury pollution in the Northeast. Methylmercury is a toxic form that bioaccumulates up the food web. In the case of loons, males are more affected than females because males are heavier. They weigh 10 to 13 pounds in the Adirondacks, and the females weigh 8 to 10. Also, females can deposit some of the mercury in the eggs they lay. It's a neurotoxin, so it affects their behavior. It makes them more lethargic and depressed. The adults won't defend the territories as well. They won't incubate eggs as well. They may not care for the young as well. And the chicks, if they're born with high mercury levels, they may not have the energy to get up on the parents' backs and back ride like they should. And that protects them from predation and also from chilling down and getting cold. So the BRI found that the overall impact of mercury pollution on loons was to decrease their reproductive success. And birds that had 3 parts per million or more in their blood of mercury had much lower than had much lower reproductive success than other birds. And what they found from west to east across North America is that the mercury levels in the loons went up. The males, again, were more affected than the females. And in the Adirondacks, we've been studying loons, again, since 1998, so over 20 years. We now are monitoring birds on over 100 lakes in the park, in every single watershed. Our work is supported through New York State DEC and New York State Environmental Research and Development Authority, and we also have several partners collaborating with us on this project. So we've developed what's called a mercury hazard profile, and that is how much mercury is in the loons themselves. And we do this by going out and actually capturing the birds using what's called night lighting techniques. I'm sure many of you are familiar with jacking deer, and we are essentially the loon jackers in the park. And we also use playback calls. So the loons, when they have chicks, are very attracted to the chick call. So we actually use the chick calls to call the adults into the boat. And we use the hoot calls to call the chicks into the boat. And they will get literally within inches of the boat, and then we're able to scoop them out of the water with a net. We have special permits from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and New York State DEC to conduct this work. And so we have a very experienced crew that goes out and does this, and I'll show you more information about this later on. Then we place these beautiful bracelets on the birds, and here's an example of what they look like. There's a yellow band with a black stripe, and then an aluminum band from the bird banding lab with a unique number on it. So if the bird is found later, then we can identify which bird it was and where it was banded. And here's an example of a loon's leg. You can see how flat it is and how big the foot can get. And some of the birds that we banded in 1998 and 99 are still out there raising chicks, which is pretty cool. Then we collect a blood sample to figure out how much mercury is in the birds. We also are looking at the health of the individual birds. And we have field staff every summer that monitor the reproductive success. And so they're looking for each banded bird on every one of our study lakes and trying to figure out if they raise chicks and if they come back from migration and if they pair up with another loon and how many eggs they lay. And here's an example of a loon going up on a nest, a typical nest. You can see that they really don't have a lot of ability to walk on land. And here's another bird going up. They usually lay 1 or 2 eggs, and they usually start nesting in sometime in the 2nd or 3rd week in May. And if the first nest fails, they may re-nest. So sometimes we have chicks hatching as late as mid-August. And here's an example of what the egg looks like. It's pretty big and heavy, and it's mottled brown, blackish, olivish green. And it's pretty well camouflaged in the nest. And then after about almost a month, the chicks hatch. And the first egg that's laid hatches first, and that chick's a little bit bigger than the other one. And they'll actually do what's called sibling rivalry the first day, where the bigger one establishes dominance over the second one. They may fight until the more submissive one gives up, and the bigger one may actually grow at a faster rate than the other because it's getting more food. But usually there's enough food, so they both grow well. And after about 3 months, the chicks are able to fly. And here's a chick that's quite capable of caring for itself, but and it's as big, if not bigger, than its mom, but it's still begging from her and trying to get these little tidbits that she's going down and getting for it. So our goal is to find out how many chicks survive to fledging age. And with this, we're able to figure out how mercury is impacting the reproductive success of the birds. We also looked at how much mercury was in the food web. And so in the water and the sediment and the plankton and the crayfish and the fish that loons would eat to get an idea of how much they were exposed to. And we did find that mercury accumulated as it went up the food web. So this is a graph that's based on about 700 samples, and it was, 300 samples through 2007. And we found at that point that 21% of the males and 8% of the females had mercury levels high enough to impact their reproductive success. Now, a lot of mercury regulations took effect in the late 2000s, both on a state level, regional level, and also on a national level. And so we're starting to see some improvements. What we did find at that time was that both the low mercury and the high mercury birds nested about the same, but the low mercury birds were hatching more chicks. The chicks survived almost the same, but the overall productivity of the low mercury birds was higher than the high mercury birds. So, and that was driven by the hatching success. And here's an example of how lake acidity affects loon mercury levels. On acidic lakes, there's a bacteria that converts elemental mercury to methyl mercury at a higher rate, and that bacteria thrives in the acidic environment. So on acidic lakes, the lakes also have higher mercury levels, and the birds are exposed more. So you can see as the pH goes up, the mercury levels in the loons as the pH goes down, the mercury levels in the loons goes up, and as the pH goes down, gets less acidic, the mercury levels go down. Sorry, said that wrong. As the pH goes up, the lakes get less acidic, and then the mercury levels go down. And this is true for both female and male loons. So we looked at where the risk was most likely in the park, and we found that in the southwest part of the park, the birds were more likely to have higher mercury levels, and that's most likely due to the increased precipitation on the southwest from the lake effect snows on Lake Ontario, and dropping more snow on that part of the park. So there's more deposition of mercury at that point and more deposition of acids. As I mentioned, the mercury regulations have taken effect, and so we started seeing less deposition in the Adirondacks and throughout the Northeast of both mercury and acids. And so on a chemical level, the lakes have improved substantially thanks to the emission regulations. And we were wondering if we started to see an improvement in the loon mercury levels also. So we looked at an analysis of our data from 98 to 2016, and we found that before 2010, the mercury levels were starting to go up, and then they stabilized after 2010. So that's a good sign that the birds are indeed responding to decreased deposition. It's just going to take a while because they live so long. Unfortunately, in the last 2 years, 3 years, a lot of work has been, a lot of effort has been to undo environmental regulations, including emission controls. And so now we may see more acidic and more mercury deposition across the country and in the Northeast too. So it'll be interesting to see how things change. We did find that on some of our lakes that were very acidic back in the late 90s, that they were, in very high levels of mercury, that they had dropped significantly over 20 years. So that was great, 10 years. So we take what we're learning and we use that to inform policy, and we produce scientific publications, and then and so that policymakers can have good, sound scientific data to use that to make their decisions, both on the New York State level and regional level, and also on a national level. BRI is also working on a global level with the Minamata Treaty, which is an international treaty to reduce mercury emissions and mercury pollution worldwide. And then we take what we're learning, and we also provide information to the public through our science summary reports. And you can find these on our website, which is adkloon.org. And these are a synthesis of our data, our scientific articles that are much more fun to read. I personally really like writing the science summary reports. They're fun. So another study we did was to look at how where Adirondack loons migrated to. And for some reason, they don't like to live here in the Adirondacks in the winter. And I don't know why, because, you know, our ice palaces are really cool, but they do have to dig down to find their fish, which is kind of hard for a loon. But when they go to the coast, they're exposed to things like oil spills and botulism, and then commercial fishing in gill nets. I don't have a photo of that, but the loons are one of the bycatch species in commercial fishing. This is a loon that was tangled in a fishing line here in the Adirondacks. So we partnered with USGS to learn more about where Adirondack loons migrate to, and we used satellite transmitters on a very few birds, and this is what they look like. A friend of mine calls this a remote control loon, but actually it's a loon with an antenna sticking out. And we found a lot of information from these few birds. Here is a male that received his antenna on August 20th. He's a green bird here. And then there were 2 females in New Hampshire that received 2 transmitters also. November 16th, he's off the coast of Long Island. And 3 days later, and through January, he's down off the coast in New Jersey. And these 2 females went to the coast of Maine and hung out there for the winter. They hung out through mid-April. Here he is off the coast of New Jersey again in mid-April, and the females off the coast of Maine in mid-April too. And this bluebird, unfortunately, the battery stopped functioning in the transmitter. The mortality signal did not go off, so we're pretty certain it was a battery problem. And then April 19th, he's off the coast of Long Island again. April 21st, right on his territory, on his breeding lake. It's a multi-territory lake. Now that female there, she took her time going back. She took almost a week later or more to get back to her territory. And, we figured there were a lot of things going on in southern Maine that were pretty interesting to her, like all the outlet stores there. So she had to shop her way back and make sure that things were okay. Here he is the day we recaptured him and we took his transmitter off. He was raising a chick with his mate and continued to do so that year. And then presumably the next winter went back to New Jersey again and gambled that winter away too. Here's a juvenile that we did. And we were really curious to find out if juvenile migration was different than adult migration. And based on a huge sample size of 1 juvenile, we do think it is different. Here is the adult we just looked at. He made a beeline for the coast. And then this juvenile, however, went from lake to lake in New York as they iced up and didn't make it to Long Island until 2 months after the adult. So my theory is that once they learn where they're migrating to, they go straight back and forth and they know where they're going. And this is an example of how loons fly. They fly nonstop. They don't soar like turkey vultures or hawks and eagles. They have to fly nonstop to the coast. So migration to them is a really high energy effort. And here's an example of another satellite bird that went back and forth to her breeding lake. And then on November 5th, we got the first signal in the morning, 10:49, and presumably she was flying before that. By 4:15 that afternoon, she was off the coast of Cape Cod. So that was a nonstop migration during the day. Pretty interesting to find out. And here she is. She went down, ended up in Buzzards Bay in early May, spent some of the winter there. And May 6th, she was in Massachusetts. May 9th, 8:23 in the morning, we got the first signal. And by 4 o'clock that afternoon, she was back on her breeding lake. And here's what she looked like. She looks great. Her antenna looks a little worse for wear. We tried to catch her again that year and again the following year, and she evaded our efforts. And then we lost track of her. And then we found her a year or 2 later on a different pond because of her band. She didn't have her antenna anymore. It must have broken off. And then we recaptured her and put what's called a geolocator on her. And this is a little device that we have to actually capture the bird a year later. And then that lets us download the information. And we found that on her, in her wintering ground with the geolocator was the same as her wintering ground with the satellite transmitter. So that was pretty interesting news too. One of the things that we also coordinate is the annual loon census. And this is conducted on the 3rd Saturday in July from 8 to 9 in the morning. And we have hundreds of people participate. You are most welcome to participate. The Lake George Association coordinates the census on Lake George for us. You can find out more information, again, on our website. So this is letting us get a snapshot of the loon population every year. So we're able to identify trends in the population and identify its status from year to year. It's very helpful. We also study the nesting success of the birds, and we do this using trail cameras. And this has been a really fun study because our field staff are out there once a week monitoring the birds, but then the trail cameras catch things that we don't have the opportunity to see, like beavers coming up next to the birds, And here's a loon chick that just hatched, and the banded bird is going back up on the nest to incubate the second egg. Here's a nest with 3 eggs. That happens occasionally. And here's a heron going by. Something we didn't know was that bears apparently like loon omelets. So in 2018, we had 2 instances of bears eating eggs. So that was interesting. We also have documented water level rise. Related to climate change, we've had several summers where we have huge torrential rain events, sometimes lasting weeks. In 2015, we had 3 weeks of basically solid rain. We had over 10.5 inches of rain those weeks. On the 22nd of June that year, this is what this nest looked like. And here it is, 23rd in the morning at 6 a.m., 12 hours later. And by that evening, it was wiped out. And here's another nest on a different territory, different lake. And this bird, there were 2 nests on that, 2 territories. One nest, the chicks hatched on the 19th and did great. This nest, they were due to hatch on the 23rd, 24th, and this is what happened on the 23rd. We had over 1.5 inches of rain that day. So. We've also documented human disturbance on some of these lakes, and because of this, this is way too close. You're supposed to be at least 100 to 150 feet away from a loon nest. And these people are fascinated with this bird, but it's not acceptable to be that close to a bird. So because of that, we worked with DC to implement management and to put buoys outside the loon nests to encourage people to stay away. And so that has helped in those instances. Another problem we've discovered is that the loons get tangled in fishing line regularly. And so the incidence of this has increased over time. Every summer we have several cases that we try and go catch and get the line off the birds. Because there's more people out there fishing, and the birds catch a fish that still has line attached, and they shake their head and try and get the line off, but then it wraps around their head, and it's a real problem. So we've now starting to rescue the birds. Other times they get iced in the winter. It's a juvenile bird that doesn't know it needs to go, and that's a pretty precarious situation. But so we try and minimize those, encourage them to leave on their own. We started this fishing line recycling program. We invite you to participate in this. We have fishing line containers that we are now distributing throughout the park. If you're interested in hosting one of these, please let us know. And we will definitely provide that and some brochures for you. We also have signs that we place at the boat launches. And we do public presentations. And we also have the Adirondack Tremolo, our newsletter that comes out. And the summer issue is now available on our website. So we hope that you'll download that and learn more about our work. And people want to know how they can help loons. Well, basically, on the water, it's common sense. You know, if you're an angler, please use non-lead fishing tackle and collect any fishing line you see, and then learning their behaviors and staying away from them, watching them from a distance. If they approach you, that's okay, but if you approach them and they're moving away, that's an indication they aren't comfortable, especially if they're tremoloing or wailing or yodeling. And then learn the behaviors. This is a bird that is doing what's called a hangover position. And it's hiding on the nest, trying to move away or trying to hide so that you don't approach any closer. I actually was away the week this photo was taken, and I got an email from my husband saying, "We've got a report of a dead loon. What do you want me to do?" And so I sent him an email back saying, well, go out and collect it and send it down to the wildlife pathology unit and find out why it died. So the next day I get an email back from him that says, with this photo attached, and the subject was "Dead Loon Lives," and this bird was doing a hiding position, and the people that reported it thought it was dead because it wasn't moving. But as my husband approached it, he saw the eye blink, and he's like, that bird is not dead. It's just incubating eggs. And it was a sticker, which was a good thing, because if it had darted off the nest, it might have kicked an egg out. So want to avoid them. On land, it's basically energy conservation, and recycling things and decreasing the amount of energy used will help protect loons and our habitats for both them and ourselves. And so our work is supported through grants and donations. We spend a lot of work during the year, writing proposals and working with donors to keep our work going and help protect these birds. And we're very grateful to everybody that helps us throughout the year. We also have a lot of in-kind support from organizations that want to help us with our work, and that makes a huge difference in our ability to do things. A few years ago, we started a Loon Center in Saranac Lake, so we invite you to come visit us either virtually online or in person, because it's a great place to be, and we love talking with you about loons and your stories about them. And so right now, because of COVID, we're open 3 days a week, but we hope to open more in the future if cases stay low. And if not, then we welcome you to visit us online. We also have some exhibits there, and we're working on developing more so you can come learn more about loons. And with that, I can show you the video of how we conduct our field work. This was filmed in 1999 on Arbutus Lake in Newcomb. And we go out at night because the loons can't see us as well at night, and we are using the spotlights to hide the boat from them because they can't see the boat if they're looking at the light. We have 3 people in a boat, a driver, a lighter, and a netter. And again, we have special permits from Fish and Wildlife Service and New York State DEC to conduct this work. And we're calling the birds into the boat. And so with the fishing line rescue birds, if they don't have chicks, they can be extremely hard to catch because they're attracted to the chick calls. And if they don't have chicks, they don't have the hormones built up, and they won't come into the calls. And if they're healthy enough, they'll just swim away from us. But if they're come into the calls, they will come straight to the boat and we're able to catch them. It's definitely a team effort. The boat driver, there's the size net we use, it's a big salmon net. The boat driver has to place the boat in the right place. The lighter has to shine the light correctly, and the netter has to be able to catch the bird, ideally on the first try. Here's the chick being caught. And that chick is about 5 or 6 weeks old. He's pretty plump. He's been eating really well. He's in the brown downy stage there. And we usually cover the heads of the birds once we catch them because it calms them down. We've also since found that chicks like to be, have their head stroked and they'll fall asleep, which is a great way to settle them down while their parents are being processed, banded and having the samples drawn. And there's drawing blood from the chick. We do take the blood from the legs. And again, this was filmed at Arbutus Lake, which is owned by SUNY ESF. And there were a lot of students and professors on shore monitoring us, watching what we were doing. And this is the adult male, the chick's dad. And he's getting his leg measured because we have the bands pre-measured. And then this way we can fit the bands to the loon, and so they're neither too big nor too small for the bird. And there he's getting a silver band and a green band with a dot on it on his right leg. And the chick's getting weighed. So we take measurements. We take feather samples and blood samples, measure the leg and the wing and the bill. And again, the students were on shore watching us and professors. And we get a lot of information from these samples. And each bird has its own data sheet, and then it goes into our database, and we're able to follow these birds over time, both with their mercury levels and their reproductive success, and their health parameters too, so we can really learn a lot Here's measuring the bills. The males have much bigger bills and legs than the females do. And here's something we don't normally do with an adult bird. We don't normally let go of its head, uncover its head until it's on the water, because we don't want to risk anybody getting damaged by the bird. But luckily, this bird happened to like being a movie star and was quite calm and watching us while we were watching it. I don't think it understood what was going on at all. And then you can see as it drifts away, you can see the bands, the orange over yellow on the left leg and the silver over green on the right. And that's how we monitor these birds. And this bird was around for over a decade after it was banded. With the chick is going back out to where the female was, and then we have somebody out there the next day checking to make sure everybody's together, and then they're monitored on a weekly basis after that. So I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation, and happy to talk with you some more if you want to contact us for questions. And we greatly enjoy partnering with the Lake George Land Conservancy and having us come down and talk with you. I'm sorry we couldn't do this in person this year, but hopefully we will do it again in the future year. So thank you very much.